Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. I hope this video finds you well on a Friday. It's actually sun shining outside, but it's still a bit too cold to garden. So what I thought I'd do is I'd create a card and then I can go out and garden afterwards. So I've actually got lots of tidying up to do so, but I thought I'd come and do a card first. Right, so what I'm going to begin with is a piece of, and this is an off-the-cuff demo because I've done no prep whatsoever, but hey ho. So I've got a piece of Pink Frog smooth card, which is the card that I tend to use most of the time, and it's 4.5 inches by 6.5 inches, and that's the card I'm going to use. And then I've got a black mat, which is 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, just to give me a 1/4 inch mat. And then I've cut a 5.5 by 7.5 inch card blank with the fold at the top edge. And I've cut my card, my actual card blank, from a piece of A3 card. And I can get 2 of those size cards from an A3 piece of card. But you don't have to use your 300 GSM card if you don't wish. I like to use it because it's nice and sturdy then. Right, so no idea what I'm going to do. All I've done is pulled out a couple of stamps, pulled out some low tack tape and my adhesives. That's it. Let's just go with it. So what I thought I'd do is I've got my low tack tape. We do need some scissors, and you can see me sort of pressing my hands against that low tack tape just so that it's not too tacky. So I'm going to mask off part of the card. So, and what I tend to do if I'm stuck for inspiration, what I tend to do is go to trusty colours that I know work for me quite nicely, or sometimes I'll go completely off the cuff and think, oh, I'll just pick any colours. And to be honest, I've literally just picked up 2 colours from my drawer that I know usually work quite nicely together, and that's what I'm going to use. So I'm using low tack tape, and I've got about 3 sheets of the low tack tape, 3 strips of the low tack tape. Now, you don't have to be precise. That's just, this is a habit of mine, I have to turn it over like that because I cannot be doing with looking for the end, which normally happens when in our house when we've got sellotape. So let me just lift that up so you can see I've sort of got about that area masked off. So let's just add that. And then, hilarious, I've got a piece of acetate. Ask me how many times I've looked for that acetate on my desk as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with cracked pistachio. So let's take a little bit of that cracked pistachio. And I've got this on a piece of acetate. And I'm going to take my spritzer bottle and knock the camera at the same time. And I'm just going to spritz it a couple of times. You can see that it's not flooded. It's got some water on there, but it, you know, it moves, but it's not sort of flooded. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tap the acetate onto my work area, just on the areas that are showing. And you can see that is very light. There's nothing too dark about it. And I'm just sort of applying that a few times. Now, you can have another piece of card, if you wish, on the side, just so that you can put the excess ink on there. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to use a little bit of the wilted violet. And you can see that I'm building the colour up very lightly. That's because if I go in lightly, it means that if I don't like it, it's easier to work with. If I add too much, and then I don't like it, I can't really take it away. So I'm just dabbing this just onto my card and dab some of those little bitty bits of ink as well. Now what I find is, personally, let me just grab my heat tool. personally, what I find is, obviously, if you let things dry naturally, the colour is more intense. However, when you're doing a technique like this, you want some results, you know, reasonably quickly. And what I find is that if I dry my card a little bit, I tend to find I can layer the colours beautifully, and I get the intensity if I layer several colours. But what I like to do is dry it a little bit. Let's move that acetate. So it's still got moisture on there, as you can see, but I've dried it a little bit. And then what I like to do is go and layer the colours again. So exactly like you would if you were doing your pencils or your Copic markers, sort of adding layers. And what happens is the colour gets more intense as you add the layers. However, if you don't want to muddy the colours, then it's important that you dry those layers. So I like to spend time just drying the layers and messing with the acetate. Now, you are going to get some of the colour bleeding under the card, under the low-tack tape, but I quite like that when a little bit of it goes under there, because my low-tack tape isn't completely, you know, sort of watertight, you know, because I removed some of that, the tackiness of it. So I'm going to continue just layering the ink. So you can see I'm just sort of dabbing so that I don't muddy the colours. So I'm going to use the cracked pistachio again, and I'm going to just add 1 spritz of the water, and then I'm going to add the colour again. And I'm just layering that colour, and I'm just taking my time just to add those layers of colour, even the little tiny bits of the colour. I'm just layering it up, and I'm just going to dry a little bit again as I layer that colour. And I love doing it with the acetate because you get a more free background, if that makes sense. It's not quite as regimented. Your background is more freeing. If you try and do it sort of without the acetate, you can't help yourself. You're not quite as free with layering that colour. So another spritz with that cracked pistachio. And I've not drowned the acetate with water. I've just added a little bit of the water and just dabbing that. And it's funny, I actually quite like, let me show you, the sort of, it's not too much, it's nice and subtle. You can see where it's run under there, but it's nice and subtle. So let's just give that a dry again. Just so that we don't muddy any of those colours. Let's dry that from the back as well. And you can spritz the card at the back, and that will flatten your card out the other way as well if you sort of use the moisture on the back as well. Just some other tips just to tell you, but I sort of do what works for me. So I'm just drying that. There we go. So let's just lay that down again, and then let's just grab one of my blending brushes. I need a couple more of these, and we're just going to take the cracked pistachio. So I'm going to layer that brush with ink. So as you can see, I'm not just going in there and going like that and done. You can see I'm actually priming it, and I'm actually making sure there's a good layer of ink. And then I'm starting on the low-tack tape and then coming out to the edges. So I'm just coming out to the edges of the acetate, not the acetate, the edges of the low-tack tape. So you can see the low-tack tape has got quite a bit of ink on there. And you can see how much ink I've applied to that brush. But most of it is on the low tack tape. So I'm then going to grab a brush. You couldn't get any bigger if you tried. It's the biggest brush I've got. Let's have the lighter one. It's the biggest brush I've got. Look at that. So then I'm going to take some wilted violet that we used in the background. But this time, did you see how little I put on there? And I'm going to start on the low tack tape and just come out. And if it isn't enough, just add a little bit more. Again, you can't take it away, but you can continue to add more. So you can see a little bit of a different process when I'm adding the wilted violet. And that's because I know the wilted violet, if I'm not careful, could overpower the design. And I don't want to do that. There we go. So then what I'm going to do is go back. This is dangerous with the acetate, is to go back with the wilted violet now, add a little bit to my acetate, and then I'm going to spritz that with water and then just add a little bit more of that wilted violet. Now you've got to be careful. You know, you're working with your colours and you don't want to muddy them. So I'm just cleaning the low tack tape so you can actually see what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a light spritz with water because that will react with where I've blended, and then just give that a dry. And the only reason I'm drying is, one, is to build the layers of colour, and two, so I don't muddy those colours. Be aware though, obviously, when you add moisture, the oxides, they react each time to that moisture. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the wilted violet, and you can see how slowly I've added those colours. So just a little bit of water again, and just adding, there we go. So I think that's quite nice now. So we'll give that another dry. I'm liking the intensity of colour. So we'll just take our time. And what I'm going to do is lift that up and dry that from the reverse as well. There we go. So I've got what is a lovely background there. And I think I'll just use a dry piece of kitchen roll just to make sure that everything is okay there. Okay, so I haven't made my mind up which stamps I'm using, but I just adore, I absolutely adore this stamp. It's in the Hoster stamp. And I just love the background. I just find it so appealing. But what I'm thinking is, you can make things look a little bit different by just using parts of it. So if I add that there, and then yes. So what I can do is we'll add the stamp to our acrylic block. Now, even though I've dried this, there's going to be moisture in this card. Oh, I love that background. There's going to be moisture in this card. But that's fine. I've dried it enough to be able to work with it. So I'm going to ink my stamp. Now it's important that I ink more of the stamp so that some goes on the low tack tape so that I don't miss the line, so that it literally comes right up to the line. So I'm inking more of that stamp than I actually need to. And you can see I'm giving it a really, really good inking. How far does it, will it reach over the bottom as well? No, it won't. So I'm just inking that up just to make sure I've got enough ink on there. Never sort of rush what you're doing. Just take your time. Now I've put all that ink on there, and I have to be honest with you, that stamp is not straight, and that is playing with my head severely. So we'll just press that down with my ink pad. Now what I love about the VersaFine Clair is, while I do my faffing, and what I mean by that is deciding which part of the stamp I actually want. So shall we do it so it's just touching? Why I'm talking to myself, it's just standard practice. So let's have it there. There we go. Now you can see I've laid the stamp down and I've got loads of ink on here, which is going to be on the low tack tape, because the low tack tape is masking off that area. Obviously I've made sure it doesn't come at the bottom where the low tack tape stops. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking my two fingers and just sort of evenly pressing just around that stamp. It doesn't matter about the low tack tape. I'm not even going to press there, because I shall just wipe that off. So I'm just making sure that this area here, it's got time to absorb into that card while I'm waffling. So just allow it. Don't sort of rush. Sometimes when people are watching you, if you're doing it live, the temptation is to rush because somebody is watching you, and I don't tend to rush. And then I can just lever that acrylic block, because it's an All and Create acrylic block, which I can't speak. And you can see that I've got some of that ink on my low tack tape, that's the reason it's there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe off the ink from that low tack tape. And the only reason I'm doing that is that so we don't get in a mess with our project. And plus you can see what I've stamped. You can see this is above the low tack tape here, which is quite nice. Now what I can do, let's grab a piece of copy paper. Which I don't seem to be able to pick up for some reason. And then what I'm going to do is just cover that all up, just in case. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the stamp down here. So I need to just see what I've got up there. So let's take a little bit where it says peace and calm and ink a little bit of that. And then I'm going to add sort of the peace and calm just down here. And then place that copy of paper back. So I'm sort of splitting the stamp up so then it looks a little bit different. And that's what I love about stamps. You can make them look different each time. Go. Let's lever that up, and you don't worry, because you can just wipe off on the low tack tape, because that black won't stay, because it's got a good open time. So I can just mop that up. And now what I'm going to do is, I haven't pressed anything down, there's nothing on there. What I'm going to do now is just blot my black ink. And the reason I'm doing that is, you've got that ink with a really good open time. You're stamping it onto a piece of card that's no longer as porous as it was when it was pure white card. You've added layers of ink, so it's like a barrier. So we're just blotting that, and you can see some of that ink. So I'm just going to give that black a little bit of a dry. So just give that a little bit of a dry. And it's worth it just to, let's remove our low tack tape yet. It's because I'm lifting it up continually. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of a dry. Just to make sure that that ink isn't going to smudge. And you can see why you need a piece of card that can take all the work that I'm giving it. And now I've got no ink on there, so I can sort of go in and bend my card back again. There we go. So then it's just deciding, have you finished with the low tack tape, or do you want to add a little bit more? So did I pull that stamp out? I always end up with stuff everywhere. And I think what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to remove the low tack tape and see what I've got, because I can easily put a piece of low tack tape back again in that position. I can easily use one of these pieces of low tack tapes and put them back again. There we go. That's it. But you instantly sort of make your stamp look completely different, which is really nice. I really sort of love how different that looks. So let me just, do I want, so where's my, because what I was going to do is eventually add a floral, which I will, that's fine. And then I was going to stamp some of these leaves sort of inside this area. But have you noticed I won't stamp anything until I'm sort of definitely sure that that's what I want. Right, so what I'm going to do now is take the same low tack tape, let's just take that, and then mask off the top where the line is. You could just use a piece of paper, you don't have to use the low tack tape, you could just use a little bit of paper. And I should have put that, do you know, that'd be dangerous if I had half a brain cell. Right, so let's put the wider piece up there. Just give me a little bit more. That's it. So I'm just protecting the top area, and then I'm just going to protect the bottom area as well. So I'm sort of swapping it around a little bit. Let's move this up here so you can see. And you can see I'm having a really good play. I'm just placing the copy of paper here because then I don't get in too much of a mess. So let's grab another acrylic block, and you can see I'm using the Leafle stamp set, Leafle 100 4. And what I want to do is sort of add parts of this leaf. And I don't have to worry because I've got that low tack tape on there. So I'm going to take my black ink again, and the stamp is not stuck on that acrylic block. It was moving around all over the place. And you can see I'm inking the whole stamp because I'm unsure which part of the stamp I'll end up using. There we go. And I'm just enjoying myself. So what I'm going to do is, let's have, I don't want the whole leaf every single time. I sort of want different parts of that leaf. And because I've put that low tack tape on there, it's just making sure, doubly sure, that I don't stamp the leaf above that area. And again, now this is going on to the white card. As you know, I have masked this area off, so there's no ink in here, which is quite nice. So let's add that there, and then we'll ink that stamp again. And don't worry about this here, I'll show you why. So we'll take the leaf again, ink up, your leaf. Make sure it's got a really good layer of ink. There we go. And shall I bring this one? There's so much. I've stuck the low tack tape onto my piece of acetate. There we go. And this is why I love VersaFine Clair, because I can faff. I don't have to, I'm not stressed that, oh, I've got to get it stamped quickly. I don't have to worry about that. So I'm just inking and allowing the ink to absorb into that white card. And that white card now is more absorbent because I haven't put the ink on there. Right, so can you see you've got a distressed edge here where you may not have pressed right to the edge or whatever? You don't worry about things like that. So that's why it's good to have these stamps. Let's just give this a wipe over because you're going to get that ink all over your hands. You know me, I don't clean my stamps. So I'm just going to dab that dry. So say I've missed a little bit. I mean, it doesn't matter, I quite like the age feel, but if that messes with your head, grab a little bit of the text on the stamp and then just add a little bit of the text from the stamp. It just looks part of it. So just add a little bit of text here and there, or a bit of a blob, and nobody knows any different. Let's just place that down. Bring this in. Now, make sure your hands are clean. When you're getting engrossed in the process, it's so easy to not make sure your hands are clean. So let's just remove this. Now, it should remove quite easily because it's been used a couple of times. But please be aware that you're working on a card that's still got moisture on there. So don't go in there and yank your low tack tape. Be aware. There we go. So you're just changing the whole design. So let's just give that a little bit of a blot, and then I'm just going to dry again. And this is what I love about stamps. Stamps are about playing with the process. And I love doing that. And then what I'm going to do is, I've given that card a lot of work. So I'm just going to make sure that, now if you use double-sided tape, it'll stick down, no problem at all. So what I'm going to do now is just add some more colour. Right, where's my pencils? Is it these? Do you know, I've got that many pencils in here. I've had them on my desk for a while. So I want dusky purple. I want thistle. What's this one? That's it. So these are the colours that I'm going for. So I have got, let me show you. It's very similar. So I've got my dark colour, which is dusky purple, my middle colour, which is thistle, and my lighter colour, which is red violet. And these are my Inktense pencils. Dusky purple is 0730, the thistle is 0720, and the red violet is 0610. And those are my Inktense pencils. I may only use 2. I think I'll just use I'm not even going to bother with a medium. So after I've done all that, I've changed my mind. That's what off the cuff means. I'm going to use dusky purple 0730 and red violet 0610. And that's what working off the cuff means. Just going to turn this copy of paper over. No point wasting paper. And I'm making sure, because I'm going to lean on this like this, so I'm going to, there we go. And I'm going to add a little bit of the dusky purple. Now, look where my fingers are on that Inktense pencil. You've seen what I've done with the card and how much I've worked that. I have to be careful now that I don't work things too much. So I'm holding it high up, and what I'm doing is I'm adding a light layer of that Inktense pencil. And I'm not going in with my hand down here and going and scratching like that. So I'm just adding a light layer. Should be a water brush here somewhere. Now let's just make sure that that is clean, which it isn't. Welcome to Tracy's world. You should always clean your brushes. So I'm just taking off the red colour, which I used in a previous demo, because I need to make sure I start with clean water. So I'll put the water here so you can see what I'm doing. And when I'm using my Inktense pencils, I've always got a piece of kitchen roll. I'm going to take off that excess moisture. I'm then going to turn the card round just because it makes it a little bit easier for me to use. And then I'm going to go in to those pencils. So I'm just going to go in to the colour, sort of drag the light colour out, and then push the dark colour down towards the bottom, and then bring it up just so that that blends nicely. And you can see I hardly used any water, and that just gives me a little bit more intensity. Now, don't go into these pencils with a soaking wet brush. You will damage them. This brush is now almost dry. So I'm going to pick up a little bit more of that pigment. Hopefully, let's use the white paper just so you can see there's pigment on that brush. And I'm going to come in with a little bit, I need a tiny bit more water. I'm coming in with a little bit more of that pigment, just so that I can intensify the brightness of the colour, and then just drag it out so it's a little bit lighter. And it just makes that circle just a little bit more intense. It just makes it a little bit more intense, which I just love. So I'm going to take my Hellebore stamp, which is 1063. You can see I often spend time taking things off the acetate. And what I want is, you're not going to see it again. Can you see this part here of the hellebore? I just want that part there. So I need a scrap of card. Let's take this out of the way and grab a scrap of card. She says, I'm trying to pick a scrap of card up with my nails. Doesn't work. Right. What you should always be prepared to do is also to experiment with your stamps. Okay, I just reached over, there we go, and just experiment. You know, if you've got things on your desk and you think, oh, that looks quite interesting, just experiment it with it a little bit. So I just want this part of the hellebore. Yes, I've got the whole hellebore there, but that doesn't mean I have to use the whole thing. So let's bring stamp in. So hopefully I've just inked this area here. And I'm stamping onto that white card, so it's quite absorbent. But I still give that ink time just to absorb into the card. There we go. So I've just got part of that hellebore. I'll just give that a blot, mainly because I'm going to cut the image out. So I'm just going to give that a little blot. Just so, because I'm going to put my fingers all over it. And when you've got an ink with a good open time, you need to be aware of that. And then I'm going to cut this out. So I'm going to cut this particular floral out. Let's grab that leaf out. And as you can see, I've not done the prep. It's off the cuff, mainly because I was going to start gardening and then thought, it's a little bit, everywhere's a bit damp and everything, so it's not quite ready. I don't want, do I want that leaf? Yes, well, let's use that leaf. You can easily cut some leaf off if you don't particularly want said leaf. But it's surprising when you cut something up, it looks different to the actual full stamp if you just cut parts of the floral. Do I want that leaf? Can you tell I can't decide whether I wanted the leaf or not? And I'm just leaving a little white border just so that that pops for me. You can also see I'm trying my best to keep my fingers away from the ink. The problem with also when you're demonstrating, when I cut out, I normally have the actual floral in here by my, closer to me, because obviously it's easier to cut out when it's closer to you, but I need to keep this in view just so you can see that. So sometimes it can look a little bit more awkward because nobody would cut holding the image this far out from the body. You would hold it closer into your body because it's just easier to do. But obviously I'm working so that you can see where I'm cutting out. So I'm just cutting that floral out. And it's only the stem there that I'm holding with my other hand, so shouldn't smudge that ink. Plus I've blotted it as well. Now, when you look at that, let's bring in the stamp set. This is the stamp set. There's the floral, but it looks different when you just use part of it and you don't use the whole floral. So it's quite nice. I quite like that. So I've then got my floral here that I can just add just here, that I will just add some colour to as well, just so you can see. Let me just so it'll go there, but I'm going to add some colour to that as well. But I will add, you see, you can put it inside the circle if you want, but I don't want to do that because I love the fact that we've got this here. So let's add a little bit of colour to that with the same pencils we used before, which was the red violet and the dusky purple. And again, I'm holding my hands, my fingers, not her hands, my fingers quite high up on the pencil, just so that I don't put down too much pressure, because you break down the card too soon and then you've got nowhere to go. And it's lovely reading your comments, because your comments mean that I'm doing the right thing when I'm doing my YouTube videos. When you receive a comment from somebody, it means that not only is it nice to receive a comment, but it also gives you feedback in that you're doing the right thing on your YouTube channel. So thank you very much for your feedback. Also, your feedback, whether it's a like or whatever, also means that as a designer, you get seen by more people. And at the end of the day, as you know, this is what I do for a living. So if more people see it, and then obviously, yes, I do then sell more of my designs, which means then I can continue to do what I love. Obviously, if I don't sell, then obviously I don't get kept on. That's business for you. But it is important that we do say thank you for the feedback that you give. So I'm just removing a little bit of that excess colour off, as you saw me do there. And just like I did with the circle, I'm going to go back with a little bit more of the lighter colour, which is the red violet. I've not added more water. I'm adding more pigment just to give me a richer colour. And then I'm just going to, let's add that to there, and then just take the excess off and just blend that out. It just gives a little bit more brightness, but what I like to do is not add more water until it's absolutely necessary, like now. So I dip into the water, take the excess off on my kitchen roll, and then come back in again, just to give me a little bit more brightness. And I'm very careful the way I add that pigment. I'm going to bring in a little bit of the darker colour, just to make it a little bit darker, and just to give me a little bit more depth. Not adding more water, just making sure I add some more darkness. I'll rinse my brush from that dark colour, take off the excess moisture, and then just blend out the lines. Inktense pencils are so forgiving, so easy to use. They're just lovely. I love something that's easy to use and gives you good results, whether you're a colourist or not. So let's just leave that to rest a little bit, and then I'm just going to come in, especially if the pen works. You often see me just checking if my gel pen's working, because if you go and use a gel pen and you try and use it on an area that is very wet, it's just not going to work. It's not going to add any whiteness at all. So I'm just adding scribbly touches of white. Let's add it to the dove. We'll just add a couple of white touches just to the leaf. And this floral will go here, like so. Where is... And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add... You see, I'm terrible for little pieces of white card. Let me just... I don't want to cover my dove up. There's just something about white card. You can see that I'm working off the cuff, and I'm just working to see. Let me just fold that in half. What I do is I think through things in my head. I hadn't planned on using this, but I like to work through things in my head. There we go. So I'm going to use this piece of card. So you can see I've not... So I will now add my adhesive. That's just a piece of card that was left from cutting card blanks out. So I'm just going to add... Come on, Tracy. A little bit of adhesive. It doesn't matter if I go too far, because I'm just going to chop that off. So I'm going to add the adhesive. I'm going to drop it like you do, because I'm trying to handle it. Place that down. So place that down there. That's it. Now I'm going to use my piece of copy paper just to use the warmth from my hand. Then I can just cut the extra off. There we go. I can add my floral into there. There we go. So I can just add this there. So I'm adding it there, pushed it in, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of the pin flare, just to give me a little bit of dimension. Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. And it's just about having a play, but I love that sort of white, because what I'm going to do then is not be able to pick my thing up, grab my Hellebore stamp, and Fridays for me, Fridays are about playing. So I'm going to use the Hellebore, then frantically look for an A7 acrylic block. Now I'm not going to stamp it yet, just see where you want it, Tracy. Yes. So I'm going to take my black ink and add the Hellebore here. You can always tell when Tracy's having a good time when she faffs. There we go. Just making sure those fingers are clean, because you've seen me cut out and everything else. Wipe them on my pyjamas like I do. Let's just blot that word just to make sure we don't smudge. Oh, it's coming along now. It's working now. It's working for me now. Just beautifully. Oh, right. Where's my little... So I've got my little 1066 stamp. Meander Through Beauty. Just adore this stamp. So I'm going to grab the little stamp. You can tell when Tracy's happy as well. So I'm going to take my black ink again. This stamp is so well used. Now, if you don't like cutting out and you don't want to do this, don't do this. Don't add this to your card if you don't want to do that. It's your card, it's entirely up to you. So let's just get rid of this big piece of card because Tracy likes smaller pieces of card to work with. So I'm going to cut around, just leave a white border. Again, I'm working very alien because I'm working away from my body. When you cut out, you have the scissors and your piece of card closer to your body. But obviously, and I've done it a couple of times, you can't see what I'm doing if I keep it close to my body. It's not very helpful. So let's just cut around. There we go. And if you want any of the products, I'll add my affiliate link. If you don't know what an affiliate link is, an affiliate link, all it means is it takes you to the shop, and anything you purchase from that shop, if it's using my link, it means that I benefit in a tiny way. So just so that you're aware of that and you understand what the affiliate link is. So I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive, just sort of down the stem, not on the florals. So I'm going to sort of work that in to there. And because I've got a little bit of adhesive on the stem, but not on the florals, they just sort of stick up a little bit and a little bit more proud. So I'm then going to cut out this one. I love the shape of this one. There you go. Then I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive to the stem again, just to the stem. I like it when these little florals stick up. If you don't want to use the florals, I mean, I just adore, they just add something to the composition for me. There we go. I'm going to add touches of white as well. So you can see I'm just cutting these little bits out. Now, when I designed this so you could do meadow stamping. But it wasn't until I cut one out and I realised just how much they add to a composition that I'm now addicted to it. I just love adding these little florals. There we go. But again, this is me doing what I love best. Little bit of faffing. So by the time you come to watch this and I've loaded it, hopefully I'll have done some gardening. And what I'm doing in the garden is, it's that time of year when things need cutting back, you know, dead twigs. I need to put bark down, which I can hardly lift. So I rely on my son, who isn't very happy because last time he pulled his back. So he wasn't very pleased with me. So I've now got a trolley that we can put the bark on. What are we like? The things I have to do. So I love these bits that stick up. Obviously, I'm aware that, you know, if you're sending it in the post, postage can be expensive. Sometimes I will hand things to the recipient. Other times I will create a box. And other times I create the card and I put it on display for a few days just so I can look at it because it makes me happy. Or you can add them to your journal. Let's have you there. I'm now talking to a bit of a flower. There we go. Let's just place that back. It takes me longer to put things back than it does to actually create the card. Let me just show you how the twiddly bits, they just add movement. Gel pen. So I'm going to add now. If I had half a brain, I'd remember to add these touches of white before I cut out, but I didn't want to smudge anything, so I'm adding them after. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. So I'm going to add some touches of white just to my floral. It's surprising what a few touches of white will do. Really does work lovely. Let me show you, just so that you can see that. Oh, just love it. Absolutely love it. Then I'm going to add some splatters of white. I love splatters as well because they bring some brightness to a design. So just make sure that you actually turn your card so you hit different areas. Right, I'm then going to take this stamp again that is from the Hoster stamp. So it is this one, the Hoster 1060, because I also like the little squares. So I don't think that card's any good now. I've got that many fingerprints on it. So let's just move that. So I'm going to stamp some of those little squares. Shall I use that one? So then these squares can become like embellishments as well. So I can use these as my embellishment pieces. So like your own little bits, sort of ephemera in a way. I'll just lift this up so you can see. So you can see I've sort of cut those squares out and they become a little bit of an embellishment. And what I'm doing is I'm adding these little squares here to balance out those squares there. So I'm just going to add those and I'm going to give it, no, I'm not going to give it that dimension. What am I talking about? I'm going to adhere that. So it's just breaking the stamp up. There we go. So that sort of balances that out. So we've got a nice balance of white, dark and colour. So it works quite nicely. And when your card is dry, go round and just add a little bit of sort of scribbly lines. I just adore that, absolutely adore it. And you can go round and you can sort of add touches of white just to highlight certain areas, and I think I'm really happy with that. So I'm then going to add that to my black mat, which is going to make that completely pop. Now in real life you really can see how that pops, you really can. So let's just adhere that. Now, if you were using low tack tape, so you can see here where the card's a little bit bent. Now, if you were using low tack tape, double-sided tape, it would, the minute you stick it down, it would grab hold of that straight away. But the problem with me and double-sided tape is if I don't get it bang on in the right place straight away, it will play with my head if I can't move it when it's not completely right. So I'm going to get that side right first, and then just make sure that this is pressed down in the middle, and then that's it. See, if I hadn't got it quite in the right place, I could move this, so it works quite nicely. So I'm just making sure I'm not touching the white Posca pen. There we go. So let me just grab this. So all I'm doing, one is making sure my hands are clean just before I press down again. And I sort of press the black card against the white card so that that makes good adhesion. There we go. So that's lovely. And it works quite nicely. I'm then going to add that to my white card blank, which again will make everything pop. It'll make it pop beautifully. So we'll just... And now's the time, like I'm doing, I'm just visualising now whether I just want some more white splatters or not. So this is on my card blank that is 5.5 by 7.5. So let me just press that down. There we go. And it really does, in real life, against that white card, it really pops as well. And for me, I'm going to add a few more white splatters. Goodness, oh, there it is. I was going to say goodness knows what I've done with the pen. And I'm just pumping that pen and giving that a shake just to make sure I do get some of those white splatters coming in to that circle. That's better. And I'll just show you, just because it comes into that circle rather nicely. I'm really pleased with that. I'm really happy with how that's turned out. And that's me doing an off-the-cuff demonstration. And I absolutely love it. I'm really pleased with it. So I hope you have enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed the process. I love just coming and having a play before I've got something else planned for the day. I really enjoy it. And if you wanted to, you don't have to put that on a card blank. You can put it into your journal. So for instance, if you didn't want to place it on the card, you could place, obviously it would just be this area here. You could quite easily place that in your journal, and then you've got something to refer back to if you're feeling a bit fed up one day, and then you can create another in a different colour scheme. And there we go. So love to all, everybody. I hope you all have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.